Hello, you are watching Downtown. I'm your host, Robbie Haigh, and today we have a gentleman from the Register of Deeds. His name is John Buckley, and he's going to talk to us about many of the things we know nothing about.
Great.
Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Robbie. Nice to see you. Thanks for
Good to see
bringing
you.
me on your show.
Well, it's nice of you to spend time with us.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about John Buckley.
Sure. So first of all, I am the Plymouth County Register of Deeds, and I know this show reaches both Plymouth and Barnstable counties. So with all respect to my colleague, Jack Mead, who is the Barnstable County Register of Deeds, if I say something that he finds out about, I want him to be very blunt with me and tell me that he disagrees with me,
well,
which may well happen.
Let's hope he watches the show and finds out.
Absolutely.
Very
we
good.
all work together.
And if you hear from him, you have to let me know.
And I will get into a little more things, but basically, just so people know, the Register of Deeds is created by statute, Chapter 36 of the Mass General Laws.
Okay.
There are 21 registry districts in Massachusetts. Some counties, like Plymouth and Barnstable, have one register, one district. Other counties, like Bristol County, Berkshire County, Essex County, Middlesex County, and a couple others, have multiple registers, multiple districts. But for Plymouth, Barnstable, and Norfolk as the closest examples physically to the site here, there's one register per county. And we're responsible for all the land record activity within our jurisdiction. Obviously, Barnstable County goes all the way out to Provincetown. Plymouth County goes from nearby Plymouth all the way up to Hingham and Hull, all the way to across west to Brockton, where my family and I live, all the way down to Mattapoisett on the southwest corner. So
it's an extensive area.
We have 27 communities within Plymouth County. So every single document related to real estate, deeds, mortgages, homesteads, we'll talk about a little bit later, and liens on property and things like that, get recorded at the registry. It's one thing to record a document, but we have very detailed indexes whereby people can find the documents in the future, a grantor index and a grantee index, that if you go online to either Barnstable or Plymouth, you'd be able to search your records through that. Or if you go on site to the registry, you'd be able to search your records through that. And basically, a grantor of property is somebody deeding out an interest, so somebody selling property. The grantee would be the purchaser, and the reverse is true for the mortgage. You actually are a grantor if you're giving up the rights in your mortgage to encumber your property with a mortgage, and the grantee would be the lender. A little more complicated than that. A lot of our websites have right on there, definitional items and things that people can search.
So that everyone who's buying or selling has to go through your...
Yes. They're not required by law. However, everyone records the documents because they want to put in the public record, make sure their title is clear.
Very good.
So that they actually own the land.
And by that, my understanding is that if there's money owing on your property, your title cannot be cleared.
Right. You have to pay off as part of a sale, pay off your mortgages and take care of any liens that are on the property, because the buyer would obviously want a full and clean title.
Sure. And I'm sure there are many rules and
and those are all conducted through a closing, the real estate sale.
Right.
And on a form that identifies all those expenses.
Very good. So what other things other than buying and selling a house would you be
Well, clearly, you know, anybody looking to protect their home through a homestead gets recorded at the Registry. A homestead is an artificial creation of the state legislature that allows individuals or a trust to file a document at the registry that protects them primarily against outside creditors. It doesn't protect them for paying their mortgage, taxes, or anything like that. But in the event you had a slip and fall on your property that exceeded your mortgage, an auto accident that exceeded your coverage, or debts you're unable to pay, you could still live in your home. So that's the homestead part of it.
Right.
Despite all those claims, as long as it precedes all of that.
Yeah. But it amazes me that the Homestead Act, I mean, it's a very reasonable amount of money that you pay for it.
Right. The legislature has intentionally put this in place, made modifications over the years to make sure more and more people are covered.
Yeah.
And the cost of filing, in our case, because we have postage and handling included, is only $37.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I find it
excuse my
totally amazing that there are so few people who know about it.
Yeah, we try to promote it.
Especially the younger people.
Well, you're right, because we do try to promote it. A lot of times we promote it, we go around to the Council on Aging's. Closing attorneys are required to share that information at the closing.
Really?
However, there's so much going on at the time you buy a home.
Right.
Especially if you're a first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
Or even if you're moving from one home to the other, there's so many issues that a lot of people don't take advantage of it.
Sure.
And it is something to take advantage of. In my experience as a private attorney and as a Register of Deeds for many years, I've never seen a negative impact by having filed a homestead.
Fantastic.
The only caution I would do if somebody is pending a bankruptcy filing, that they can consult with their bankruptcy attorney before they do that. That's just a caution that we do.
And you're a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer.
I didn't know that.
Sure.
Is that a prerequisite for being the register?
No, but a lot of the registers are. There is a lot involved with the law and interpretation of certain filings. Sometimes our job at the registry is not just to record documents, but to make sure things don't get recorded.
Oh, really?
So, for example, if somebody had a neighborly dispute and they had a fight over the location of a hedge, you can't just go file something against somebody's property and claim all that land. There's a process you have to go through, many times through the courts.
Yeah, I have heard in the past, not really associating it with the registry, but I've heard of people who wanted to build like a sun porch and couldn't because if they did, they'd be 2 feet onto somebody else's property.
That is a little outside of our authority. Okay. Those documents will be recorded eventually, but those are really responsibility of the city and town's zoning codes.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to get a waiver from the zoning code on closeness to lot line or things like that, you actually go to the building department, talk to the building inspector, and then he'll tell you that you're not entitled to it if it's too close, and then you file a zoning board appeal to the zoning board to get a waiver of the codes. However, when that is granted and it needs to be in your chain of title, because the next purchaser wants to be sure that the house they're purchasing is fully in compliance with the law, those decisions are recorded at the Registry of Deeds to be in reference back to the owner of the property, so people can find those in the future and know that they meet the code, because a lot of times when you purchase a property, the lender assigns someone to go out and make sure you're fitting within the boundaries of the code.
Very good.
And if you're outside of that, you'd really want to be able to show that you have applied for and received zoning relief.
The more I talk to people like yourself, John Buckley,
Sure.
the more I realize how interrelated the different departments in towns are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which
Right.
need be.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I will say, in Bonstable's case, in our case, we have a great working relationship with town departments. In my case, I do office hours and go around to all the town halls, and for the purposes of any member of the public. We do one a month in 27 towns. It takes a couple of years to circumnavigate all that, but we just did one down in the lovely town of Marion, and we have one coming up. That was in October and November in Marshfield, so we try to go different directions.
Oh, very good.
And during those office hours, I will go around and talk to all the departments that, in more cases than in less, use our land records to make decisions. So, for example, the assessors base their assessment of, under the law, full and fair value. When they assess and put a value on people's house for tax purposes, they use our records to show what transactions have occurred in similarly situated property sales. And so they use our records. Members of the Conservation Commission many times find it useful to go in and get a copy or look at our records on boundaries, on decisions that they're making, who are the property owners. Certainly, in many cases, over the last 10 years or so after the foreclosure crisis, a lot of communities have really tried to follow the chain of title when properties have been at different stages of foreclosures, who actually has title of the property, who is the actual owner of the property.
Yeah.
And so we have a great working relationship with municipal employees, and encourage that. And we also, on a side note, we do a lot to promote a history in Plymouth County. Very proud of our history in Plymouth County. So
very good.
We also make an effort during those meetings to, get around to the, invite the historical commission members in to talk to us and show them that they can have access to our records and find everything. So when I was at Marion Town Hall, the chair of the historical commission, which is a town-appointed board, came in and we talked about a couple historical things that they have that we can help them get the title, the documents, related to the ownership of that over time. Marion has, a great number of historical things down there, from the Neds Point Lighthouse and other things that we talked about. Mm-hmm. We also, in Plymouth County, promote our history through a Plymouth County Registry of Deeds land record collection.
Okay.
So we've picked out about 90 so far, either important people or places that have significance, from the boyhood home of Rocky Marciano in Brockton, the only undefeated heavyweight champion history, to Daniel Webster's home in Marshfield, former Senator Webster, to places like various parks in different towns. We just, Island Grove Pond in Abington, we just rededicated a park in Brockton that was donated to the city of Brockton by shoe manufacturers. Oh. So we actually were able to come up with the actual recorded will of them, the Keith family, who donated a park in the Campbell section of Brockton as a public park for the use of the public. So
is your office the one that makes the decision whether or not a property goes on the historic?
No, but we do work closely, making sure they have the records to do
Again, working closely with other
that's a different process, but we do follow that. And clearly, anything that's made it to the National Register or even the State Register is notable in its way. But I will tell you, and I say this all the time, and I don't want to run through our time without talking about more, but we had a building committee. We built a building about 14 years ago that took over for a 1906 building right in Aubrey Street in Plymouth. And that building committee changed into a display committee, so we do a lot of displays on the history of Plymouth County. And so I went to that display committee meeting and I said, I've found this thing, I saw this thing in the Globe on the Shall I Go Naked pasture in Plymouth. And whoever I asked, from very important high up people, nobody had ever heard of it. Wow. And of course there was a woman who was a title examiner, they're private people that work at the registry, that shot her hand up and said, I know where that is. And she says, right off of Brayley Lane. And she knew exactly. So that was one of our first entries into it. So there was a woman who lived on Brayley Lane that would come to the street to every passerby, and she would beg for money, beg for alms. And when they rebuffed her and said, no, I'm not going to give you any money, she'd say, well, shall I go naked? And that reference was later included in the subdivision as a reference, the Shall I Go Naked pasture. Every single parcel that's been transferred out has that in
funny.
There. So I go around, a lot of, town halls and presentations and, talk about, Daniel Webster, Rocky Marciano. There's a John Boyle O'Reilly, who was a famous Irish poet that lived in Hull. All these really very interesting people. But the one that gets the most questions is the Shall I Go Naked pasture.
I love it. Okay, so is your office also associated with the Preservation Act that they have?
We collect the money as part of the recording fees. We collect the money and then forward it off to the state, and they bundle it together and they distribute it to the communities that have accepted the Community Preservation Act. And I know more and more communities are looking at that. They're looking at the fact that since they're paying a surcharge for every recording within their town, they're leaving money on the table if they don't take advantage of that. I know recently in our county, Abington and Rockland both voted it in. I know that Boston just voted it in. Oh. So there are more and more communities going after that, basically smaller pie now, and people aren't getting the percentage of reimbursement that they did years ago.
But it makes good sense. We have a beautiful new town hall because of the preservation.
And Plymouth uses some great projects beyond, including the town hall. They did a tower, a bell in one of the famous churches. That they were able to use that in that particular way. I know very good. In the town of Abington, it's brand new. They do an assessment of a memorial bridge, which is crumbling. And they're using it just as an assessment to how to move forward. And a lot, the Community Preservation Act is used for historical purposes, housing, and other preservation activities.
Okay. So can you come up with, I know you do a lot, but what is on my mind right now is I've been hearing a lot about nursing homes closing, and would your office be a part of what those nursing homes were going to be used for in the future?
We haven't really heard about the nursing home piece of it. However, in a related matter, South Shore Chamber of Commerce, which is more up in our end, along the Atlantic Ocean, actually Quincy down to Marshfield, I would say.
Okay.
Came out with a study recently about the need for housing. They see the increasing workforce having great difficulty in finding housing along the South Shore. They have talked about the rising cost of housing because of the shortage of inventory that that realtors see every day. And one of the more interesting things that they talked about, because they talked about some things that are on the table before, like transit-oriented building, housing around commuter lines and things like that.
Right.
But one of the more interesting things that I saw was the transition of malls into housing.
Very good.
So clearly, we all see Amazon, in online purchasing, taking away a lot of what usually has come from box stores, hard concrete stores.
Yeah.
A lot of companies are going out of business. I happen to think that this holiday season is going to have a horrible dent into their on-site purchases. I think online is really ready to take off, particularly through Amazon and other. And I think that's going to affect all these malls that have put millions and millions of dollars into, concrete brick and mortar buildings.
Right.
And I do think that particular suggestion to be prepared for it, and again, it's up to the city and town zoning departments to make those decisions.
Yeah.
To take a look at that as a way maybe to intertwine, some housing into some of those what will be soon empty buildings. And I think the same thing would apply to nursing homes.
Yeah. And we know too that the trying to think of the name of I'm sorry, I can't think of it. Walmart. The Walmart that was over in Cordage Park they didn't really use that for a long period of time, and then it lay dormant for so long.
Sure.
Yeah, and now it's gone.
I know they have plans, and they're moving forward with different proposals at Cordage Park. I mean, that also is part of a notable land record collection because of the great history and the thousands of immigrants that they employed in the rope making over there. But they're in a transition phase, you're right. And as are a lot of old industrial buildings that just factories that are being turned into housing all over the place,
Yeah. Well, there's quite a rise in the number of condos in and around town also. Does that change
condos
anything?
Get recorded with us.
Yeah.
They follow the same standards of sales that others do. Clearly, all of their rules and regulations, when they're created, get recorded with us. Many, and that guide not only the origination of them, but also the further management of them are all in the rules that are all recorded with us. And once in a while, we'll get a call, how do we find them? And they're all indexed. There are multiple pages, as you can imagine, but that's where those records are kept. And, the changes in housing, many of them are suggesting that South Shore Chamber of Commerce report are coming, denser zoning so that they bring down the cost of housing. Things like that are things that are going to be looked at in the future. I mean, clearly a lot is affected by, state and federal government, the rules and what they do to help or not help people as they go forward, have an impact on it. Clearly, there's going to be a new Federal Reserve chairman announced today, and who they say will have the same policies as the current one. But those decisions on the interest rates have an effect on housing. Not so much so far, but over time. and whether or not they want to heat up the market, which they did based upon the problems from the 2008 meltdown, to a more cooling effect they're doing now by slowly raising rates due to the concern about inflation. Yeah. So it's all intertwined, as you said, not just our local communities and what we do, but certainly what the federal and state government does relates to housing and our activity.
Well, the good thing about many of the condos that we've seen happen is that they are taking over some of the older buildings, and instead of bulldozing them, they've been doing a very good job of restoring.
And there's not as many issues with them. There still are issues, but not as many when you go into taking an abandoned manufacturing facility and cleaning it up with condos. There are still traffic and other concerns like that get brought up, again, locally, but those things that all are in consideration.
Well, I thank you for all of your information.
So sometime we'll have to do a part 2. We didn't even beginning to delve into some of the things.
We will have to do a part 2.
Okay.
And I know you're used to being in front of the camera, so we'll contact you.
Good.
Shortly. But this has been wonderful. I personally was very interested in getting this Homestead Act information out there for people to.
So I invite you at some point to come visit the registry. I'll show you around.
I will take you.
We store the original Plymouth Colony records, which covers Bristol, Barnstable, and Plymouth County. And
excellent.
Some very, very interesting things.
I'll take you up on that. Thank you, John Buckley.
Okay, nice to be with you.
Thank you so much. And thank you out there for being part of our show. This is your host, Robbie Haigh, saying I hope to see you again real soon.